Okay, we're going to be tying a golden stone today. We're going to be using an Ahrex FW531 in size 12, as well as some Superfine nanosilk 30 denier. For the head on this, I'm actually using the Nymph Head Evolution caddis size large. And I know these are for caddises, but that's what I prefer, and you know, I just think it looks really good. These have two sides to them. It has a pointy side and then a flat side. I like to put the point on the bottom. And I put some 0.20 lead-free wire down, and then I hit it with a little bit of Superfine resin. And now we're going to get started. I like to use this white nanosilk for this, because even though it says that it's white, I mean it's practically clear. Get that laid down there. Now the dubbing that we're going to be using for this is going to be Superfine dubbing, and this is the Superfine collection, and I'm using Wimbledon Yellow. I'm going to put just a tiny little bit of dubbing on here. You don't want much. This is just going to be what we use to splay our biots out. And I like to get in there and just clean it up a little bit. It's not that big of a deal, but now for the biots, we're going to be using Magpie Materials turkey biots. I put them to where they're splayed outwards from each other. Now you get them where you want them, then you transfer hands. Now you want to do a little light wrap around, and then a second loose wrap, and then you can cinch. Now they always move around on you. You know, they're very slick, but just take your time. And then we're going to push up against the little bump that I made back there, and that should give us just the perfect amount of splay. Then we're going to work our thread up towards the lead-free wire. Now once you get to the lead-free wire, go ahead and snip them off. Now for the body on this, we're going to be using another Magpie biot. And now with these biots, I like to put the concave side facing away from me and then counter wrapping it. It's just the way that I prefer to do it. Everybody has their own method, but when you face it away from you, it lets you like fold it when you go to wrap. So you're kind of folding it over on top of itself. Alright, and then we're going to grab our CNF hackle pliers here. And we're just going to wrap that forward. Now, you can use the rotary function on your vise if that's what you prefer. It is really a personal preference type of thing, but this is how I'm going to do it. Oop. These biots are very, very slippery, as you can see, and I don't really bother with them when they're wiggling around. I don't try to keep them perfect, because when you get to the end, you can kind of pull them where you want them. Take a couple thread wraps to secure it there, and we're going to snip it off close. And you should be left with a decent body. Now for the next part, I'm using some brown latex. Don't remember what brand this is. I actually think it's Orvis brand. but I'm not 100% sure. So once you get that cut to your liking, you want to make sure that you're putting a V in it, but you don't want to, I don't like to bring it to too much of a point. That's just my personal preference. Then we're going to tie that in, and I tie it in right up by the eye because this stretches, and when it starts to stretch over top of itself, you want to make sure your orientation is perfect. Now stoneflies have a really long thorax, so I'll come back and cover up one or two of those ridges. Next step here, we're going to grab some more of that dubbing, and we're going to start building this up. Once you get that right where you want it there, we're going to grab two more of these biots, just like we did earlier. And it's not that big of a deal if you don't get them perfect, because you can always adjust them after the tie-in. See, like there, I tied them in kind of crooked, but that's really not a big deal, because I can come back and adjust them. Take a couple wraps, make sure you got everything secure. And we're going to come in with our scissors. We're going to snip the excess close. Now this part's very important. Now when I pull this over and secure it, sometimes those legs will get a little wonky, and that's okay. I pull it tight, and then I come forward, and then I fold it back on itself. That's going to leave us with a decent notch there. And we're going to repeat the same step. And that's okay if it looks like it's too much there, as long as it's not too much, because this is going to flatten out when you pull the latex over. Now remember, each time you do this, you want to make sure that they're splayed outwards from each other. And I do the loose wrap and then I cinch when I tie these in. And I try to make sure that they're all close to the same length. And again, if they're not perfect, you can just move them around however you need them. You don't have to really worry about it. And they're going to get adjusted in the end anyway. And if they splay forwards like this one does, that's perfectly okay. And again, we are going to snip off our excess close. Same process. Now if you get your latex a little crooked, don't worry about it, because you can pull this latex in whatever orientation you need it to be. Now, a lot of people put biots on the front as well, and if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But the reason I didn't do that on this fly is because this is more of a simpler pattern. I have a couple that I've did that with, and they do look good when you put the antenna on them, but we're not really going for like an extremely realistic look here. So this is where it can get complicating for some people. We're up on the eye or up on the bead here, but it's no big deal. And if you don't have turkey biots, you can use goose biots but as far as the body goes, you know, you're going to struggle to get a goose biot to give you the length that you need. Not saying it can't be done, because it definitely can, but goose biots are a lot shorter than turkey biots normally. I have some pretty long goose biots, but again, normally speaking, they are shorter. Now right here, I'll actually come in front and then I'll fold these back a little bit, and that's going to prevent biots from sticking up. And I grab a tiny little bit of dubbing, not very much at all, and we're just really trying to cover up those thread wraps. And then I'm going to come on top of the head and jump over. So I like to push my thread towards the rear of the hook when doing this part. And then I'll take a couple of wraps behind. And once you get this where you want it, then I'm pushing down with my scissors and then pulling up, and then we pop that right off. And then we're going to whip finish. But I use my fingers because I'm pushing back with each wrap. That way I don't crowd the eye any more than it already is. And then we're going to cut that off close. Now we're going to use a real thin resin for this. And I do keep it very thin. Now the back end of these are very thin. I like them thin. I think that they look better like that, but you can certainly build up the back of this where the biot is if it's not thick enough for you. That's the way I prefer it though. Alright. Now the next thing we're going to do here, again, this part is optional, but we're going to bend these biots. I'll put a little tiny drop of resin in there, then I'll bend it forward. And you can make them as perfect as you want, but I kind of like to make them like different directions a little bit, or different heights, because if one of these are in the water, you know, they're not going to just sit there and look perfect. You want it to look like it's like trying to swim, or, you know, you don't want to make it like picture perfect, unless you're only making this to take a picture of it and put it on Instagram or something. But you know, this is a fishing, this would be fished. But most people that fish them aren't going to take the time to do this part anyway. And I always get asked like how durable these legs are when you fold them and put resin on them. And I mean, it literally just depends on, you know, how aggressive the fish are, or how aggressive the landscape is that you're fishing in. Like if it's a lot of branches and rocks that it's going to be getting drug across and all that. It just depends on a number of factors, really. You can use a tweezer to bend these if you need to, or you can use your fingers. And you do want to make sure that the bends are kind of close to the same spot. And sometimes, like right here, you know, you'll get one that really don't want to bend. You just push it back. And once you get a bend in there, it'll be easier to orientate it. And then I always put just a little bit back here on those tails. And now you see I got these legs going each which way in the back, kind of giving that swimming motion. And you got to make sure you can see through your eye. And like I said, you know, the eyes do get crowded on these. You know, there's not going to be much you can do about that, but I mean, you can start the bead back a little bit. That's what I did on some previous ones that I tied. So if you're worried about crowding the eye, you can start the bead back, and you can see this one I did with an antenna on it. You can start the bead back just a little bit, and that will keep you off of the eye. But for this one, you know, this is just what we decided to go with. And if you want, you can come in the very end, and you can hit it with a brown marker, which we will do here. Just a little tiny bit, just to hit that thread. Not much, just a little tiny bit. And that's going to do it. That is your golden stone. If you guys have any videos you'd like to see, please let me know.